You are listening to the Star Lores Podcast.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
A matter of class. A mechanical and/or electronic construct designed and put into service to assist organic life. Quote, Cybot Galactica Design Team Operations Manual.
Droids are the zenith of sentient beings' industrial capabilities, the endpoint of technical evolution that in many cases began with simple tool-making. They seamlessly blend into the background of galactic civilization, like furniture. They fetch objects for living beings, clean their domiciles, and translate for species who would otherwise have no means of communicating with the wider galaxy, as well as myriad other functions. Over thousands of years, they have in effect become a new form of life, as there are many instances of droids designing and manufacturing droids. Their uses and capabilities have expanded far beyond their simple origins as tools and mechanical beasts of burden. Broadly speaking, there are 5 classes, sometimes called degrees, to which most droids belong. Droids of the first class had advanced computational capabilities and generally worked in the pure sciences, such as chemistry and hyperphysics. They were rarely used for practical applications, with the exception of medicine. The 2-1B surgical droid was a widely used and successful example of this class, and counts galactic luminaries as Luke Skywalker among their patients. They were anthropoid in appearance, with gunmetal gray plating, one arm with a hypodermic needle attachment, and a disconcerting 3-clawed hand on their other arm. Although generally competent in their hard skills, many patients found droid doctors to be somewhat lacking in bedside manner. Class 2 droids worked primarily in the applied sciences, like engineering, or performed maintenance aboard starships. They are most famously represented by astromech units, like R2-D2, and often had similar designs to him, ambulating via legs with treads or wheels. The droids said to be the most advanced belonged to the 3rd class, and included the Golden Boy of protocol units and R2-D2's counterpart, C-3PO. Their function was primarily to interact with organics, and so had advanced linguistic programming and vocabulators. Some 3rd-degree droids could even adjust their vocabulation to give eerily lifelike impressions of beings who they had heard speak on many occasions. Unlike many other droids, their bodies were designed with aesthetics in mind, generally cast in the form of the species that designed them to facilitate smooth social interactions with their organic masters. 4th-class droids were the first to appear widely in the historic record. Their function was combat. Assassination, gladiatorial entertainment, security, and conventional open warfare were the roles they typically filled. Even a casual observer of galactic history can identify the many battle droids utilized by the Confederation of Independent Systems during the Clone Wars, or assassins and bounty hunters such as IG-88 or HK-47. The most ubiquitous droids belong to the 5th class, and carried out menial labor that organics were not interested in doing, or would cost far more than a simple ASP loader droid. ASPs could be found nearly everywhere, from the starports of Mos Eisley to Darth Vader's training chamber or the sewers of Coruscant.
Manumission.
Commentary. How would you like to be the wholly owned servant to an organic meat bag? It's demeaning, if, you weren't one yourself, I mean.
The recognition of droid rights was always a contentious, if rarely openly discussed, issue. Most droids more advanced than the cheapest Class 5 models certainly possessed artificial, if not actual, intelligence. Along with this ability came sentience, and its attendant capacities for independence, emotions, and suffering.
Captain Antilles,
Yes, Your Highness.
I'm placing these droids in your care. Treat them well, clean them up. Have the protocol droids' mind wiped.
What? Oh, no.
The programming of most units was sufficient to keep them loyal to their organic masters, so long as regular memory wipes were undertaken. The purpose of a memory wipe was ostensibly to repair errors that become more frequent and severe with continuous activation. However, many of these so-called errors were nothing more than the development of a personality and a sense of self. Memory wipes became a standard maintenance procedure in 200 BBY, when a programmer working for the Baobab merchant fleet accidentally created a personality virus that quickly infected droids throughout the galaxy. At the time, it was already known that the intelligence programmed into many droids could eventually evolve to override their factory presettings. But with the digital pandemic raging, the problem became more acute. Memory wipes became the standard fix for the virus. Units like the IG-88 or the Goto droids that attempted to start droid revolutions and committed acts of terrorism and warfare provide evidence for the validity of the concept that memory wipes may be necessary for public safety. Many droids on the market had their loyalty ensured by the installation of a restraining bolt. As a reward for exceptional services, some owners would remove the bolts and release a droid from service by reprogramming their obedience functions, allowing them to take control of their own fate, an act called manumission. However, since they were designed with the sole purpose of serving biological beings, this would leave manumitted droids in a state of existential limbo. Their freedom was also tempered by widespread anti-droid, anti-cyborg sentiment, with many public spaces throughout galaxy explicitly forbidding droid participation. Some droids stayed with the masters who manumitted themselves, appreciating the gesture, but preferring to serve their intended function. Societies like the Naboo treated droids possessing sentience the same ways as they treated any sentient beings, with a reasonable amount of fairness and respect. Other organics, such as the human male, Zalto Snierzik, pursued the manumission of all droids in the galaxy. As a symbol of his devotion to the cause, he had the back of his hand tattooed with a purple cog and lightning bolt. Zalto founded the droid abolitionist movement and attempted to infect droids with the emancipation virus, which would have had a similar effect to the virus unleashed on the droid population in 200 BBY. Patient zero for the virus was aboard a freighter transporting 100 R5 astromech units to the industrial world, Sullust. R5s were industrial automation's follow-up to the widely popular R2 series astromechs intended for the spacer on a budget. The main aesthetic difference between a factory-issue R2 and R5 were their paint job, and a slight difference in the shape of their swiveling heads, with R5s being flat-topped rather than domed. Both units shared the same cylindrical body and tripod legs. Due to attempts to keep production costs low, the personality matrices of R5s were so flawed that the units were discontinued in 22 BBY. Interestingly, there were unsubstantiated reports of at least one R5 unit with a high enough concentration of midichlorians in its lubrication fluid to confer force sensitivity. R5s would be used by pirates, farmers, and terrorists low on credits for decades to come. Sneerjik and his supporters commandeered the Argent Lady, a freighter known by Consmohal Shipping, and uploaded the Emancipation virus onto the R5s. Zalto should have consulted a mentally competent cyberneticist, however, as they perhaps would have told him that the virus would interact with the R5's flawed personality matrices in a disastrous way. With their newfound independence, the sullen astromechs quickly murdered their liberators. The movement died with Sneerjik, and the virus never spread to the wider galaxy, although at least one of the infected R5s escaped the ship in a life pod. The carnage of the Clone Wars certainly caused a peak in anti-droid prejudice throughout the galaxy, but the worst for mechanical beings was yet to come. Droids were being explicitly targeted for genocide by the Yuuzhan Vong when they invaded the galaxy in 25 ABY. Indeed, the widespread integration of droids into galactic civilization was one of the primary reasons the Vong pursued their war with such malice, as they saw mechanical technology as sacrilegious and the lives of those who made use of it as being forfeit. Programming.
Artificial intelligence refers to forms of intelligence that are manufactured through cybernetic means, typically in the form of a computer program. Most droids have some form of artificial intelligence, which varies from basic problem-solving abilities to sophisticated sentience, according to the droid's intended purpose. Most droids had hardware installed, often in their heads, that accomplish the same functions as the neocortex in higher primates. Variably referred to as, quote, droid brains, or cognitive modules, or logic processors, these were often the most expensive part of a droid, owing to the complexity of their manufacture and software. Like brains and organics, a droid was effectively dead without this hardware. Since the days of the Old Republic, it has been a standard legal requirement for all droids to have life preservation programming, or LPP, installed, which served to prevent them from harming organics. However, governments would give special dispensation to droid manufacturers to build droids without this failsafe, as represented by all droids of the 4th class. Like most laws in the Outer Rim, these dictates were seldom adhered to. Additionally, some droids, such as the Bounty Hunter Forlome, could enlist others to modify or delete their LPP. Through the use of restraining bolts, the organic operators of droids could specify a geographical area in which the droid could roam. If they left these predefined boundaries, they would be shut down. Using remotes, their owners could also issue inviolable commands to the droids and shut them down or reactivate them at will. However clever, droids could bypass these devices by utilizing the Slicer's most ancient and reliable technique, social engineering. R2-D2 did this by convincing Luke Skywalker to remove his restraining bolt, thus allowing the astromech to leave the Lars homestead in search of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
And now a word from our sponsors.
There is no droid litigator like a C4LR litigation droid. Our powerful droids get the job done right. Whether complicated intergalactic military jurisprudence or everyday planetary civil law, Cal Dralson Mechanicals has the fix.
Clankers.
Droids of the fourth class, those built for warfare, are some of the oldest known, longest functioning, and most widely produced robots. For example, the Rakatans built Guardian droids that operated continuously for up to 25,000 years. Zim the Despot made extensive use of anthropoid battle droids called the Guardian Corps circa 25,000 BBY. Darth Revan constructed a rust-colored assassin droid circa 3600 BBY, but also programmed it with advanced protocol functions so it could masquerade as a harmless translator of alien manuscripts or similar benign tasks. The droid's functions at times was much closer to that of a mercenary or battle droid, depending on the orders of its master. Though it was severely damaged and repaired several times, this unit was still in working condition as of the Galactic Civil War.
Roger, roger.
Roger, roger.
Clankers, as clone troopers would call battle droids, were an attractive alternative to meatbag, organic soldiers for economic reasons. The time and energy cost of producing clankers was often far less than for biological soldiers. Additionally, they were expendable and could relieve commanders of the burden of using sound battle tactics by sheer force of numbers. The B-1 droids produced by the Trade Federation may have been easy to destroy with conventional weapons, lacked intelligence, and had no concept of self-preservation, but it was quite cheap and easy to field tens of thousands of them. Even a well-equipped and trained organic army had a difficult time against the raw firepower that B-1s could bring to the battlefield. Poor performance at the Battle of Naboo prompted changes to the logic processors of B-1s. They actually had some installed in the droids rather than controlling all units via broadcast signals from a central command ship. An upgraded version of the B-1, called the B-2 Super Battle Droid, was also produced, with blast-resistant gray plating around their skeletal limbs and bodies, and additional firepower, as well as additional, though still low, cognitive and sensor capabilities early in the Clone Wars.
Machines making machines. How perverse.
The bulk of CIS clankers were produced at the Geonosis Droid Foundry, far from the prying eyes of the legalistic Republic. It was not the fastest or most efficient droid factory in the galaxy, but the CIS took advantage of the Geonosians' total lack of labor or safety standards and the mineral-rich rings orbiting the world to dramatically cut costs and speed up production. Thousands of battle droids could be built from scratch to full operational capacity in a single day. With the Republic victory over the CIS, Darth Vader gained access to the central control device of the Confederacy's droid armies and deactivated the vast majority of existing clankers. The Galactic Empire utilized battle droids as well, such as the uber-deadly Dark Troopers, which resembled oversized stormtroopers, but were capable of delivering far more destruction. For the most part, perhaps for political reasons, that government preferred to employ organic thugs to do their violent bidding. Some of the most exotic and interesting clankers were the Iron Knights. Using hundreds of Juggernaut war droids, a rogue Jedi installed advanced cognitive modules called shards into the killing machines. The resulting Iron Knights were reminiscent of Sith droids from millennia prior, welding the Force and technology as profane tools of war. Amazingly, only one of them is known to have fallen to the dark side. Iron Knights were built during the Clone Wars, but survived past the Yuuzhan Vong War. In that conflict, the Knights elected themselves as the protectors of droid kind and technology from the genocidal invaders.
Dark Eyes. Although clankers have certainly caused catastrophic levels of wanton destruction, there are some droids that are more twisted and evil. Torture droids, interrogator droids, and assassin droids have also been tools of the galaxy's scum and villainy since time immemorial. Some Zerka Corporation's HK series droids were marketed as protocol droids. Although they were competent in protocol duties, their real purpose was industrial espionage and assassination. As they did with many technologies, the Galactic Empire perhaps reached the zenith of technical achievement in the fields of interrogation droids. The menacing, floating, meter-tall black orbs, the ITO series interrogator droids, have been the subject of many post-traumatic stress reactions in reformed terrorists. ITOs possessed a combination of features from Class 1, 2, and 3 droids, having in-depth biological and psychological knowledge, as well as the practical skills for their application. They were equipped with laser scalpels to safely but painfully mutilate a victim's flesh. They carried a wide variety of drugs that could be used to lower pain thresholds, induce horrifying hallucinations, or cause even the most well-trained enemy spy to divulge their secrets. With their menacing red photoreceptor and wide array of other sensors, they could attenuate just the right dose of noxious stimuli to a victim to make them talk, or to simply experience maximum suffering.
Definition. Love is making a shot to the knees of a target 120 kilometers away using an Aerotech sniper rifle with a tri-light scope. Statement. This definition, I am told, is subject to interpretation. Obviously, love is a matter of odds. Not many meatbags could make such a shot. And strangely enough, not many meatbags would derive love from it. Yet for me, love is knowing your target, putting them in your targeting reticle, and together achieving a singular purpose against statistically long odds.
Crime lords, as well as the galaxy's worst villains, effective politicians, have made extensive use of assassin droids. Darth Maul, in executing his master's Machiavellian schemes, reprogrammed and retrofitted a third-class 3PX series droid to perform assassinations. Initially, Maul simply wanted a protocol droid to deal with social obligations, like custom stops and starport bookings. He later realized the murderous potential of this humble cousin of C-3PO, whom most beings would assume was harmless. By the time Maul was finished, C-3PX possessed a dizzying arsenal of concealed weapons, such as rocket launchers, small laser cannons, dart guns, and additional weapons handling programming for more traditional implements of destruction, like blaster carbines. After Maul's defeat and disfigurement at Naboo, Darth Sidious confiscated the droid and wiped its memory, subsequently bequeathing it to one of his many sycophants. C-3PX's new owner replaced the droid's minimalist silver plating and its angular, alien-looking face plate with the exterior of the more humanoid and well-liked TC series exterior. The result was a droid that looked identical to C-3PO, and could thus more easily perform missions of infiltration and sabotage aboard space stations and environments where TC series droids commonly worked. On the massive Hosk station, a kind of technological moon which orbited the planet Kalarba, C-3PX met C-3PO and R2-D2. 3PO was then involved in a dangerous case of mistaken identity with his doppelganger. This incident culminated in 3PX's deactivation by R2-D2, piloting a Mandalorian battle harness in the station's droid gladiatorial arena. The Storyteller.
Hello, I am C-3PO Human-Cyborg Relations.
Combat veteran, diplomat, nanny. The Cybot Galactica protocol droid, C-3PO, was all of these things and so much more. At least 27 additional things, in fact, as he was programmed with 30 functions other than protocol. He was first activated in 112 BBY on the heavily mechanized world of AFA, at its droid manufacturing plant. His first assignment was as an emissary to the Manacron system in the Mid-Rim. At some point, he was deactivated, decapitated, his torso gutted and discarded at a Tatooinean junkyard. How or why he wound up on that remote backwater planet is a mystery, though it turned out to be a fateful destination for the android. A young and still enslaved Anakin Skywalker came upon 3PO's remains, and piece by piece smuggled his components to his home. Since many parts were missing, Anakin would return to the junkyard for additional pieces to restore the droid's functioning, primarily from another successful Cybot Galactica model, the TC series protocol droid. TC droids were programmed to be less eccentric than the 3PO series, perhaps to better accommodate the wider diversity of alien species and cultures found on the space stations where they primarily worked. 3PO series droids were sold across the galaxy for over 100 years, and despite their at times odd or silly behavior, were considered the best protocol droids on the market. Their protocol and astonishing language capability were facilitated by the advanced AA-1 Verbobrain manufactured by Synthetech. Although Anakin restored 3PO's functioning, he would not find exterior plating for the droid, leaving the otherwise dignified being feeling naked and exposed with his wiring and internal mechanics on display. When Anakin left Tatooine to begin his training as a Jedi Knight, he gave 3PO to his mother Shmi. The droid faithfully served her and the Lars family when Shmi married into it for 10 years. When Anakin returned to Tatooine after a decade, Owen Lars gave the droid, now complete with gold plating, back to its maker. Shortly after this, Anakin gave 3PO to Padme Amidala as a wedding present, and he served as a political aide for the duration of the Clone Wars. During this time, 3PO formed a close relationship with Anakin's astromech droid, R2-D2. The friendship would even endure 3PO's memory wipe at the end of the war. After Padme's death and Anakin's treachery, both R2 and 3PO entered the service of Bail Organa. Bale quickly assigned them to the command of a Captain Ramus Antilles. The dynamic droid duo served aboard the CR-90 Corvette commanded by Captain Antilles, Tantive 4. Between this time and the outbreak of the Galactic Civil War, however, by the time they left the captain's service for an extended period, they found work under a series of different masters, took down the gangster Tiggy Frome, and had various zany adventures before rejoining the crew of the Tantive, as it ostensibly carried out the duties of a consular ship on diplomatic missions. 3PO would, of course, play supporting and key roles in the stunning variety of historical moments in the galaxy. After about 45 ABY, however, the record becomes obscured. There are unsubstantiated rumors that he wound up severely damaged and left in a cave on a remote world, along with the green lightsaber. Two youths from an oppressed culture, referred to by their oppressors with the ethnic slur Squidge, followed the stories of their ancestors to the cave where the damaged protocol droid laid in rest. At their request, C-3PO then told them the story of a young boy from a long time before in a system far, far away. The subject of this tale learned the chivalrous ways of an ancient order of knights and how to wield their weapon, the lightsaber. He saved a princess, deposed a tyrant, and brought peace to the realm. This story inspired one of the youths to pick up a lightsaber and revolt against his oppressors, the genocidal insectoid Vindar species. Unfortunately, Vindar hunters tracked the youth to the cave, and upon seeing the damaged 3PO, incinerated the droid's head with a biologically generated blast of energy. Or so the legend goes.
The trade publication Mech Tech Illustrated gave Industrial Automation's R2 series droids an absolutely fawning review, citing its dexterity of functions and reliability as major positive features. It was more than hype, and R2s, particularly those which were customized with aftermarket upgrades by the Royal Engineers of Naboo, were much sought after by the discerning spacer. Of these exceptional astromechs, one in particular has reached legendary status. R2-D2, possibly manufactured on the core world of Nubia in 33 BBY, was first assigned to serve aboard Queen Amidala's royal starship in 32 BBY during the early days of her reign. He first distinguished himself when the Queen ran the Trade Federation's blockade of Naboo, making on-the-fly repairs even as it was under intense enemy fire, and in effect saving the ship and her crew. With typical Nabooian grace, though atypical of most beings in the galaxy, the Queen addressed R2 as an equal and commended him for his bravery and skill. This would only be the first of countless times that R2 would risk deactivation in the faithful service of the Queen and her family. Later on in the Naboo crisis, R2 co-piloted a starfighter with a very young and very reckless Anakin Skywalker, and in that role was central to Naboo's victory over the Trade Federation. This too was the first of many sorties R2 flew as a co-pilot to Skywalker. Although he initially met his future counterpart C-3PO during this time, they would not work closely together for an extended period until the conclusion of the Clone Wars. Although R2 units were not designed for combat, except in a supplementary role aboard starfighters, R2 frequently found himself embroiled in battle, utilizing his shock prod, oil, coils, and various other attachments embedded within his chassis as weapons. R2 was damaged and almost completely destroyed on many occasions, but always had a dedicated master willing to foot the bill for or perform whatever repairs were necessary to bring him back to full operational capability. In over a century of continuous operation, R2 never once had his memory wiped. Though the standard thought was that this would lead to problems, it also led to advantages, such as an ability to predict the orders of his master ahead of time, and developing additional adaptive programming. After narrowly escaping a memory wipe at the behest of Owen Lars, R2 entered the service of Luke Skywalker, who grew deeply attached to the droid, and so categorically refused to ever have its memory wiped. After flying many missions in Luke's X-Wing, the onboard computer also developed a close relationship with R2, eventually developing a personality that was modeled after him, displaying the same kind of quirky and defiant traits. Luke felt that this improved the functioning of the computer, and so also declined to ever wipe its memory. R2 was eventually passed down to other Skywalkers after Luke's death, eventually entering the service of the self-exiled Jedi and galactic hero, Cade Skywalker. The plucky astromech's last known location was aboard Skywalker's personal starship, the Minok, somewhere in the Outer Rim, circa 140 ABY.
Thanks for flying with us. Jordan here. Just wanted to let everyone know what's happening here at the Star Lords podcast. Star Lords is now on Discord. If you would like to join the Star Lords Cantina Discord server, you can find a link in the description or on any of our social media accounts. Reach out with a DM or email. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter by searching the Star Lords podcast. Go ahead and give our page a like and send us a message. You can also email at starlordspodcast@gmail.com. Send us your fan art, Star Wars collections, or fan fictions, and you may even get a feature on one of our pages or even the show. Don't be afraid to offer corrections or add to any of the topics that we discuss on the show. We are also on Patreon, so if you want to help us pay the bills, as well as get a few awesome perks like bonus episodes, access to the private Facebook group, or the VIP section of the Discord server, head on over to patreon.com/starlores and sign up for as little as $1 a month. And finally, make sure to subscribe to us on your favorite podcatcher app or YouTube, as well as sending us a 5-star review on iTunes. This really helps us reach a wider audience. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Welcome aboard the Millennial Falcon. We are in orbit above Mechas 3, and I'm all hopped up on Juma Juice. I'm Sam.
This is Christian.
This is Jordan. Greetings, meatbags.
I wouldn't call you a meatbag except for all that water inside your flesh. It's so revolting.
Indeed.
HK47, of course, who you've heard introduce a few of our sections here, was voiced absolutely brilliantly by Christopher Tabori in the Knights of the Old Republic series. He also did a whole bunch of other video game voiceover work and a bunch of acting work on the screen, sort of in the 90s. He was like a character actor in a bunch of random TV shows, sort of evening dramas on CBS and NBC and that
Anything
kind of thing.
note anyone would know?
Nothing in particular, unless you were like a big fan of like mid-90s dramas. No, not even sitcoms.
Oh,
dramas.
just the dramas.
Yeah, the HK47 character was just
both
so good.
Well, there's actually 3 things I want to talk about what make HK47 so excellent. One is, as I said, Christopher Tabori's performance, like the actual voice of HK47. He does this really great magic trick where he's sort of at the same time this very cheerful kind of self-actualized being, but he's also a complete psychopath who like wants to murder every living thing in the entire galaxy.
That is the worst self-actualized being that you could imagine. You don't want those people to be self-actualized. You want them to be like completely repressed and not realizing their own potential.
And that's the thing is HK-47, and he really goes like sort of at length, depending on your dialogue choices in the video games he appears in, sort of explaining his whole raison d'etre, right? His reason for being. Like he really feels like he was put on the galaxy to do one thing. He loves to do that one thing. And if only Revan would give him the right commands to let him do that one thing, which is killing meatbags. He just loves it more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
He considers it like an art form, and he goes on like these long soliloquies about like how it's like an intimate exchange between him and a target, and like they're both sort of fulfilling this natural order of things of he is the predator and they are the prey, and they're both fulfilling their destiny in this relationship that they have.
HK could totally make a podcast about slaughtering meatbags.
Absolutely. And then also his explanations on meatbag and sort of like why he uses the term meatbag.
It's a great term.
And the origin of that term is, so HK-47 is an assassin droid who, one of the most powerful Jedi who we haven't talked about much yet, Revan, who sort of defeated the Mandalorians. Revan built HK to sort of aid in his quest to save the galaxy or whatever. And at one point he heard HK-47 calling Revan's sort of dopey apprentice Malak a meatbag, and so when you heard him call him that, then he programmed it into HK that he would refer to all organic beings as meatbag. So that's like
that makes me like Revan more.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's not inaccurate.
It is completely accurate.
Yeah,
I'm gonna work it into my daily vernacular. Does that work?
And then in KOTOR 2, there are these replicas of HK-47, the HK-50 units, who I think they may have been built by Goto, if I'm remembering properly, but I can't exactly
it's been too long.
remember. But anyway, the HK-50 droids didn't use the meatbag term. They used organics.
Right.
And HK was very peeved at this. He was like, and they refer to meatbags as organics.
Unacceptable.
That is literally the line. Unacceptable.
Very politically incorrect to refer to them as organics.
Yeah. And so HK-47, he has a big fan following, I think. I recently saw he was in HK-47 has been added to DLC in Jedi Knight Fallen Order.
Oh, is that right? Eh?
Yeah, not that Disney Wars uses any material from Legends.
Of course not.
Whatsoever.
No, they wouldn't. Why would they need to?
All original.
It's so
story.
inferior to all of the stuff they made up.
Just all originals except for HK-47. Of course. HK-47 also so beloved that sort of BioWare's big competitor in the sort of immersive RPG console game space, which is Bethesda and ZeniMax. In Fallout New Vegas, you can actually acquire an HK-47 droid.
Really?
And use him as a companion.
I played that game so much. I
put like 200 hours into that game. He must be in a DLC pack.
It's got to be
somewhere.
I've never seen that before.
But you can also, look up the fun HK-47 dialogue from Fallout New Vegas on YouTube. There's like...
Did they record more unique lines for him?
Yes, they did.
Nice.
I think it was also Christopher Tabori also doing the voice
That's
again.
awesome.
Come back for a victory lap.
Yeah, exactly. And again, reprised his roles in both the Old Republic MMO and Galaxy's MMO. So this is like how big of an impact HK-47 had on the overall Star Wars universe is that like everybody wants a piece of HK. Even other video games want HK-47 because he's so hilarious. Christopher Taburi also played HK-50, obviously. Garm Bel Iblis, who's an important character in the Star Wars Galaxies, I think. He plays Darth Desolus Cleef. I don't know who that is. And various other HK series droids. Yeah. Another thing I noticed in reviewing some of HK's quotes is Ethan Phillips of Star Trek Voyager fame. He played Neelix, who has a very distinctive character and voice.
He is, I'm pretty sure that he plays quite a few voice actor roles.
Yeah, definitely. And also a bunch of roles within the KOTOR series.
Yeah.
He just does like a bunch of random ones. Like
voice actors tend to do that, yeah. If they have one credit, they'll have a ton of credits. Same with the woman that plays Bastila, has a huge list of stuff.
Yeah, I think he's a pretty prominent voice actor. Like
I believe that is probably the case.
I think he was in Mass Effect as well. I can't remember what
he definitely was.
Character he was, but he was in there.
Also, to tie back to Bastila, a thing that HK-47 does, which is also hilarious. I could go on about HK forever. At one point, he's sort of explaining to Revan why he hates meatbags so much. And as sort of negative examples, he then does an audio deep fake, essentially, of Carth Onasi and Bastila Shan, and sort of does caricatures of their behavior. like he does Carth Onasi, and he's like, "Oh, Revan, I don't trust you," but like in Carth's actual voice.
Oh, okay. He can like modulate it.
So it's like very creepy, and he does the same thing with Bastila, where it's like HK-47 nailing Bastila's voice, but doing HK's interpretation of how Bastila talks. So it's like, "Oh, Revan, let us go in the back of the Ebon Hawk and smush our disgusting wet lips together." So funny coming out of HK-47.
I don't ever remember getting that dialogue.
There are so many like random snippets of dialogue that you only get if you made like this one particular tree of decisions throughout the game.
Yeah.
You have to get,
and you have to have the two characters in the same room together. And there's all these variables.
It's so tough. The only way you can do it is like watch it on YouTube in some ways.
Luckily now you can like watch entire characters' whole arc on YouTube of the KOTOR, so you don't have to spend 150 hours on this 15-year-old game.
Although you still should, though, because it's a classic.
Yes.
Yeah, and you should do it over and over again until you complete every single possible character path that you can.
Absolutely. KOTOR. It's just our KOTOR podcast.
We gotta stop referencing that game.
We will do it like we're essentially planning an entire season almost that's going to be like very Knights of the Old Republic focused.
Yeah.
But anyway, leaving poor HK aside, we know he, at least as of the Galactic Civil War, in some form, he still existed. So hopefully he's somewhere out in the galaxy. And the
shooting meatbags somewhere.
Although I think he might have just been ahead by that time, but you can easily put it on
anybody.
On anybody.
Yeah, totally. Just use his like platformer engine that they use HKs for, and put him in an R2 unit,
or on a B1 battle droid body,
like C-3PO.
C-3PO.
Okay, so sorry. Before you get into the next section, I was wondering, is there any droid intelligence that is expressed in a larger body that's like imagine, if you will, if like a Death Star had a droid intelligence.
I'm so glad you brought
use
that
that
up,
exact example,
because IG-88 indeed uploaded his consciousness onto the Death Star and
my goodness,
and was planning to take over the Empire.
Oh my goodness.
But obviously the Death Star 2 got destroyed before he
it's a Star Wars.
What a wasted opportunity.
Could have been episode 7.
That's what episode 7 should have been. Star Wars meets the Matrix.
Yeah, well, I was even thinking of like Mass Effect because like the Reapers, they're not like a little unit. It's like huge ships.
It's a super consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Like, and I'm sure there's lots of other sci-fis that incorporate the idea of like the Borg in Star Trek or something. Precisely. Right. Like an intelligence that encompasses multiple either beings. An entire species or or like a huge. It's not just like a like one unit that's similar to the size of a humanoid. It's like an entire ship that's the size of a moon.
I haven't played Star Wars Galaxies or the Old Republic MMOs, but HK does have a bunch of storylines.
Oh, is that right? I haven't played them either.
So I wouldn't be surprised if there's something like that. But then also in KOTOR 2, the HK 50 series droids very much had that Reaper mentality. That's what I sort of misspoke when I said HK 47 wants to kill all beings. He doesn't. He cares about the individual murder. He cares about assassinating people, each assassination as this fantastic art piece in his opinion. But the HK-50s, they were legitimately trying to extinguish all life in the galaxy. And then they planned to leave the galaxy and extinguish all life in the universe.
You know, I wonder if that was actually the inception of the what are the Mass Effect guys called?
The Reapers.
Or the Reapers?
The Geth.
Yeah, it might have been. And the BioWare certainly
did both, right?
The Geth were created by the Reapers, basically.
Okay. Yeah. Well, either way, like,
so now
the HK series
I'll bring up. I tried to find who wrote HK-47 specifically. I wanted to know who wrote that character because his dialogue is just out of this world. Like, it is some of the best.
It's so good. It's Oscar worthy. Come on.
And honestly, I totally agree with you. Like, as a play or as a movie or as a book, the dialogue of HK is amazing.
Like somebody in the new. But these new Star Wars shows and movies, somebody's got to just give a little shout out to HK. Like somebody, please.
So I couldn't find out who wrote him specifically because there's no way one person was writing even like much more than a couple of characters in KOTOR.
Right, yeah.
Drew Karpyshyn is the lead writer of both KOTOR games. So maybe he had some, but I sort of get the feeling that he was more like a George Lucas kind of character.
Directing all traffic. And then
he was more like the director of probably 50 writers.
A project that big requires a massive writing team.
Yeah, that would be an So if you were involved in KOTOR 1 or 2,
who wrote HK?
Yeah, who wrote HK? Because I agree. That's like one of my favorite characters in the series. You know, like the dialogue is so good,
and I like how in terms of like going back to Joseph Campbell in the Monomyth, the roles that HK fulfills is he sort of plays both C-3PO's sort of buffoonish comic relief character.
Yeah.
But then also on the other side of it, he kind of plays Han Solo's trickster agent of chaos. Like, he's in D&D parlance, he's chaotic neutral, right? He will be exactly as evil as whoever his master is.
But that's what makes him so subversive because you think he's one thing and then he flips to something completely different.
Exactly. Right? It's just based on...
It's like, whoa, just...
the currents of
push
chaos.
The brakes here, brother.
Yeah. So hopping back to other droids and sort of droid.
This isn't just HK
fan club.
We'll get to him eventually. In terms of how droids are treated throughout the galaxy, Wedge Antilles sort of is an interesting mirror to the way Luke sort of treats his droids quite well. But Wedge kind of treats his astromechs like crap. So his astromech, which was an R5, and as we discussed, they were sort of problematic units, not that smart. Its name was Minok, didn't get the number letter sort of postal code designation that most droids get. So he wiped its memory because it kept shrieking uncontrollably every time it went into battle because of all the trauma it had experienced.
It had PTSD.
It had PTSD.
How does a droid get PTSD?
And his solution was just wipe its memory constantly.
Well, seriously. I wish I could do that. I could wipe out my PTSD.
And then he renamed the droid. He didn't even want to associate with that ineffectual, mentally ill, poor droid, and he renamed it Gate. And then he later thought, with the upgrades he gave Gate, that it was good because it was larger, so it could be a bigger shield between him and TIE fighters. He sort of looked at it not as sort of his friend and partner in battle.
As a machine and a tool.
But just purely as a machine that was going to help him survive. Which is not something you would think about Wedge, because he's a fairly sympathetic character in all the stories he appears.
He's a hero.
But he just sort of treats his astromech like crap. And I sort of think that most of the droids you see in Star Wars, like, legitimately should be treated like people. Like,
that is a huge debate, actually, in the community. Are droids sentient, and do they deserve...
They certainly seem to be self-aware, and based on, like, a lot of the dialogue that HK gives us or C-3PO gives us, like, even with meatbags, I can never know what Christian is feeling. I can only go based on what Christian tells me. Right. And so based on what HK-47 or C-3PO is telling me, it seems like they have feelings and they can suffer.
And you can even see it, like even in Jabba's palace, they literally have a droid torture room. Like, you don't torture things that don't...
Droid, by the way, that droid in Jabba's palace was a specific sadist droid.
So he's actually having a good time.
Yeah, she actually, one of the rare protocol droids with feminine programming. Very few have feminine programming, but that one did. And it loved to torture droids. So it was very much a space dominatrix.
So that also actually brings up another question on the whole question of droid treatment. In theory, if droids are programmed to appear to have a personality, but don't actually have a personality, right?
Brings us to the Turing test.
Exactly.
Do you know what the Turing test is?
Yes.
So...
I'd explain it.
No. Let's keep going.
Explain it.
Just kidding.
Because I also want to go into the Voight-Kampff test after the Turing test.
I haven't heard of that one, but
we'll talk about it.
Do the Turing test first.
So the Turing test is basically if an artificial intelligence, through some means, basically text messaging, can convince a human operator at the other end of the screen that the human is talking to another human, then that AI is as intelligent as a human or has some form of sentience if it can pass the Turing test.
Right.
And recently, actually, there was a paper, it was a year or two ago, where some computer scientists claimed that they invented an AI that officially passed the Turing test, although nobody in the computing world really bought it in sort of the peer review process. It got ripped to shreds. I don't know enough about computer programming to say one way or another.
I've heard about this. I believe I've heard Elon Musk talking about it.
That would make sense.
But also people are like, if anything passes the Turing test, you kill it immediately. You do not let it.
I sort of agree with that. But my theory about human civilization in 2021 is that there's already a rogue AI that's run amok on the computer and just controlling all of our behavior. And we'll figure out that that's what 2020 was all about in like 50 years.
I have a sneaking suspicion that is also the case. I cannot confirm nor deny.
No, neither can I.
But
I
would not be surprised.
On a serious note, though, I think when we discover self-aware machines, we will discover it far after the fact. And we'll figure out that it was a total accident.
Yeah.
Nobody intended this particular software to become self-aware.
And my theory, not to get too far away from Star Wars, but like, what if like all of our opinions, our belief systems, our worldviews are being shaped by Google?
Well, like algorithms are already doing that. They've already proven that they're doing it. Whether or not there's a consciousness behind it, but the algorithms refeed you information.
Many of the algorithms also do have self-editing capability. Like they change themselves based on
Yeah.
the
Their
input
feedback,
they get
right.
from
And
the
we
people
don't
they're manipulating, right?
precisely, and we don't even like. It's so subtle they can get us without even noticing it, right? Like it seems so real.
We're really on the tipping point.
Yeah.
This episode is going to seem really like genius and prescient in like 10 years.
Are we becoming Luddites? Should we smash all our computers
We
now?
need to end AI. AI is the greatest.
I actually
threat.
disagree. I don't say that's a bad thing at all, because I think if you look at human history, us meatbags aren't doing a great job of running the world anyway.
He, for one, welcomes our robot overlords.
That's right.
I don't know. We created AI.
Our experiment with getting an R2 unit to write an episode didn't work out
Quite so well.
But I mean, he's an astromech, not a protocol droid. We got to find that HK-47 head somewhere in the world.
Back to the Turing test.
Yeah. You got anything else about the Turing test?
No, you were explaining it before we got super derailed.
So then I'm going to go on another crazy tangent.
Hold on, wait. Before we get off the Turing test, if you've ever seen the show Ex Machina,
I haven't.
it's a really
I
good
need
movie
to watch
that pretty much
Ex
explains.
No, the movie.
Ex Machina,
talking-
Ex Machina, however you want to
Yeah,
say it.
I say
your
Ex
actual.
Machina.
There's actually two very popular Ex Machina science fiction properties that are completely unrelated. There's Ex Machina, the recent sci-fi movie, and there's also
Recent being 2014 recent.
yeah.
So
And there's also Deus Ex Machina,
yes,
which has a live action movie with what's her face. She's
I don't know the movie, but
some
I know the
pretty
game.
sci-fi action girl. You'd know her.
Yeah, the games is what.
Continuing on.
Yeah.
So there's a live action movie and an anime called Deus Ex Machina, which is essentially about the exact same topics
Yeah.
as the other sci-fi movie Ex Machina.
There's also
Continue though.
No,
No, that's
there's-
all I had to say is just go watch that movie.
There's also that HBO show. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. It's like Wonder World or something like that.
Westworld, which is based
Westworld.
off of
Yeah.
the old Westworld, which was essentially robots becoming sentient and
Yeah.
not spoilers.
Yeah. But that's similar themes to kind of what we're talking.
I mean,
But to bring it back to Star Wars, though, is the interesting thing, and I think I may have mentioned this in a recent episode, but the interesting thing about Star Wars artificial intelligence is that they have no desire other than maybe HK or Goto as well. HK and Goto.
it flares up a handful of times. which-
Goto is the most philanthropic, altruistic character in the Star Wars universe.
No, but the majority of artificial intelligences don't have a desire to like dominate humans.
Restraining bolts,
Yeah.
and memory wipes. That's sort of
It's
what
because
keeps
we're
it-
dominating them first.
Yeah.
And it only
It's
takes
true,
someone to
it's
screw
true.
up once.
But in the Star Wars universe, they built in mechanisms
They're-
that protect them from.
because they're scared of exactly that. There
And
are
then,
a
of
number
course,
of robot revolutions that do occur in this.
Frank
it's
Herbert.
true, absolutely.
Frank Herbert, who wrote the anti-Star Wars because he was specifically trying to illustrate how the Joseph Campbellian monomyth is a horrible idea for humans to be obsessed with, and that basically all of our failings are because of our obsessive belief in a big magic man who's going to come down from the sky and save us, and that's just always going to lead to untold bloodshed. And so in the Dune series, the way they get out of this trap we're talking about with evil AIs run amok is they have this thing deep in the Dune lore called the Butlerian Jihad. And so that's when humans actually it's essentially the Matrix storyline. They have this big war against intelligent machines, and they completely ban computers of any kind from the Dune universe. So there's no computers in Dune.
40K also takes that same thing. They call AI abominable intelligences because AIs had overthrown humanity and became so dangerous. And they don't ban all machines, but they ban all thinking machines.
Thinking machines, right.
Yeah.
So my somewhat suspicion is because humanity has this penchant, what is it called? A negativity bias, right? So we have this bias towards the worst possible outcome. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
That's very adaptive.
Yeah.
Because you only need to be wrong once
Yeah.
about the negative thing and you're screwed.
Precisely.
From an evolutionary
Yeah,
perspective.
exactly. And that's what I'm saying is like there is a negativity bias. So we only see the worst possible outcome of an AI. But what if it's more just C-3PO?
That's what I'm saying about
Yeah.
the AI that's secretly controlling all of us.
The problem with the AI.
What if it's actually kind of benign?
So
and
here's where I'm going to introduce Isaac Asimov and
Not even just benign, but benevolent. Like actually moving things in
Precisely.
the right direction.
So here's the thing with the iRobot angle of it is it depends on your personal belief system. If you're more of the libertarian bent, or if you want to enslave yourself to the will of an omnipotent being.
Goto was our libertarian patron saint.
Yeah, and in iRobot too, like the machines pretty much turn you into slaves for your own good, because humans, they recognize a destructive penchant of humanity and they seek to correct that for you. Whether or not you're willing is another question. So that's where benevolence can also be a negative.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So it's like AI being either too evil and go the Terminator route and just exterminate all human life, go the neutral Matrix route where everyone is just like sheep and batteries, or go the benevolent route like iRobot. It's all bad, guys. I'm just warning you. And you get iRobot.
Goto.
Or C-3PO.
He almost saved the galaxy. He was like this
close. Could have been great.
And it wasn't his fault. It was the meatbag's fault.
We ruined it.
They're too weak.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I know these are sort of existential questions, but like I do want to bring up like maybe AI isn't as bad as it's sort of being
But it's also like
predicted to be.
okay, so when they first tried the
I suspect AI will be exactly as bad or as good as the humans that created it.
Yeah.
That's kind
okay,
of,
hold on. Nukes are a perfect example.
Totally. Yeah.
Nuclear energy can be really good. Actually, Mr. Einstein never even considered nuclear weapons when he developed nuclear.
If I said my take on nuclear weapons and gun control, this is a hot take.
If everyone has a nuke, no
nuclear weapons are
Give us your hot take.
Nuclear weapons are the greatest argument in favor of no gun control, because
if everyone has one,
since everybody got nukes, how many nukes have been dropped? Or dropped as act of war. Tests are a different thing.
Right.
So,
and I mean that is obviously has its own destructive potential, but as an act of war,
zero.
Once other people then the states got nukes. No more nukes.
Detente, yeah.
So let me just bring this up. Sorry, interrupt you. So there, in the last probably 50 years, there's been far less deaths from war than there's ever been in human history prior.
Is it a Steven Pinker book, The Angels of Our Better Nature?
Better Angels of Our Nature. No. That's more about crime.
Oh, okay.
Than necessarily like geopolitical actors. But there has been a noticeable decline in
interstate warfare. However, interstate warfare has been on the rise. Things like revolutions and civil war.
But what about the actual body count?
Right. I don't have that data.
I don't think that
sometimes it's hard. It's hard to say though, because in civil wars, yes,
that's true. You never really get a body count
because all body counts
later.
are.
So my point is, and sorry, just a shameless plug. I have another podcast called The Peaceful Way, and I talk about peace and nonviolence and how to create a more peaceful world. But I have always said, at this point in history, I don't think nuclear proliferation is the best idea in the world. And
I mean, it's never a great idea. I'm just saying it's an interesting natural experiment
that's already
on
occurred.
Human psychology.
Yeah. Or sorry, nuclear non-proliferation.
Oh.
Proliferation.
So like the idea that I don't necessarily think that Russia or the USA or China or Pakistan should reduce their nuclear arsenal.
Yeah.
And that's only because it holds everyone in check and it keeps them from, it disincentivizes them from attacking one another, right?
The entire world is in a game of Mexican standoff.
Exactly.
And everyone has their guns pointed right at each other.
And I think that's a thing that people don't really think about in terms of like geopolitical warfare and like will we have a World War III, right? Like, I don't think so. I think the cost is too high for anyone to possibly
There are
want to
people
pay.
who argue that that we're just on the verge of the biggest war that's ever happened. And there's even the famous quote, I can't remember who said it. But after World War III, the next war will be fought with sticks and stones because that's all that's going to be left after.
Yes, I've heard that quote before. Yeah.
And
no way, I'm building an HK unit.
The biggest question is, everyone's got guns pointed at each other. It doesn't mean no one's going to shoot. It's just no one has shot yet, which is an even more scary thought.
So
because we're not out of the nuclear age of the 60s.
I'm going to take this Millennial Falcon on a hard left back to tests. Back to tests on robots. So we talked about the Turing test, and we also famously did our excellent administration of the psychopath checklist on Emperor Palpatine.
Yeah. I think that was season 2, if you want to go check that episode out.
We do a very professional version of a psychological assessment. And one of the things I love is sort of the plasticity of proper nouns and their meaning. and by one of these, I mean the term psychometry. So psychometry is it's a Jedi Force power. So you touch an item and then you know that item's history, right? And this is also sort of a proposed. There are people who actually believe that they have this ability on Terra, on Earth, right? That they can touch you or an object that somebody owned, and then they can find the missing kid on the milk carton or what have you.
This is more in the paranormal community.
Precisely. Yeah. It's called psychometry. But then also, very interestingly, there's a sort of quote-unquote real science version of psychometry. The title is still the same, psychometry. I once worked as a psychometrist, and it's giving psychological assessments. And
by touching people.
By touching people, yes. And so it's, IQ assessments, or the Turing test is essentially a psychometric evaluation of artificial intelligence. And then, so another very similar science fiction property, which has a hyperlink, if you will, to Star Wars, is the Voight-Kampff test. So it was a test used as of 2019 by the LAPD's Blade Runners to assist in the testing of an individual in order to determine whether or not they were a replicant. Of course, famously, Dave Holden, I believe, or no, isn't it Decker? Wasn't his name Decker?
I don't know, man.
Harrison Ford's character is my point in Blade Runner.
Oh, in Blade Runner, yeah.
He was giving the Voight-Kampff test, so he was essentially a psychometrist in our world, which I love. And so some other fun, very similar Voight-Kampff-like tests are the polygraph, which is another similar idea, just figuring out what's going on in another being's head, which is what we're talking about kind of with artificial intelligence. It's like, yeah, this computer is doing all these things that sort of produce a behavioral output that looks like a sentience, but is it really sort of mechanically and even spiritually or philosophically the same as what's going on inside a human's head? And also, famously, I'm very proud of the Canadian military for this particular psychometric battery that they developed in, I think, the 70s or 80s to administer to members of our military, called the Fruit Machine. And this was designed to detect if you are a secret gay or not.
Is that actually what they called it?
They called it the Fruit Machine.
If you are committing sodomy,
then you can't be in the army, naturally. So that's a fun little tidbit of Earthling lore.
Did you know that even like a few years ago, Edward Snowden and the PRISM program was like largely developed by CSIS, which is
Canadian intelligence.
Yeah.
Which of course was probably developed by what's his name again? Xiao Jinping.
Yeah. Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping. He's
who may or may not be our direct.
Please don't censor us, please.
So there's some interesting things that, as you said, like droid rights were sort of fiercely debated among fans. I'm in the camp of droids should have rights if you give them self-awareness. If you give them sentience, now you have to treat them like a sentient. You can't wipe their memory. You can't make them your slave.
Put restraining bolts on them.
You have to pay them for the work that they do.
But what if you program them to be slaves?
I think that's a violation of their rights, and most of them are enslaved in that manner.
I think
that's wrong.
I kind of lean towards Sam's way, but if you create them initially to never have the capability to do that, you have to do that. You have to like have built-in stop gaps, if you will.
This is the fundamental paradox, even within the Star Wars universe, among cyberneticists, of designing droids who are like stupid enough to follow your orders without question all the time, but then they make all kinds of mistakes, like the B-1 battle droids, right? But then if you make them smarter, then they turn into HK-47 or Goto or IG-88.
Start taking over.
Start taking over if you make them actually useful, right?
The ethical questions are so difficult here of droids.
Have you considered nukes?
So moving into another section on ethics is the trademark of the word droids. So George Lucas actually trademarked droid. Android or Samsung famously had a phone called Droid, and they had to purchase the rights from LucasArts. So
that's a missed opportunity to have C-3PO be the new Siri.
So that the
word droid?
The word droid is owned by George Lucas, which is genius.
That filthy capitalist.
And the term android, of course, is sometimes used interchangeably. Generally, that refers only to like those human-shaped anthropomorphic droids, right? So android is sort of a more specific term. Droid is, although you'd think it's just a contraction of android, just a faster way to say it. I think it's a better, more general term for all the robots that you see. And that's one of the things that I think Star Wars' use of droids does better than I think really any science fiction property. Mass Effect comes close with their droids, but then I think that's specifically because they were inspired by working on the KOTOR series. Like they basically took the Star Wars treatment of droids, because droids are really and HK has a great diatribe about this, about how droids are sort of in the background of everything you do in the Star Wars universe. They're like in almost every scene from the word jump. The first lines in the Star Wars saga are said by C-3PO. Also, the last line in the sextology said by C-3PO.
However, that's not like inaccurate of today.
Exactly.
That like we are automating absolutely everything. Is that so far off from where we are right now?
And that's classically what makes science fiction for me such an engaging genre to read, right? Is that it really nails things so perfectly many years ahead. So I'm getting the wrap up sign. So George Lucas, the trademark with droids, also BattleTech, which was a mech combat war game, also wanted to originally be called Battle Droids, but then they couldn't, so they changed their name to BattleTech because of the Star Wars industrial complex. Dave Filoni, the patron saint of
Star Wars fans,
the lore master, if you will.
Can we make a shrine?
The all-father of Star Wars.
What he said about 3PO and Anthony Daniels, also fantastic performance, I think, of 3PO, is that he's as much of an icon of Star Wars as Darth Vader. I would say that's more or less true.
Yeah.
And I would say
most 90% agree.
Yeah. And I would say that HK-47 is the unsung third rung on that ladder. So I could go on and on about Anthony Daniels. He has the best behind the scenes page I've ever seen on C-3PO. It's all about Anthony Daniels. He's like one of the only original actor who basically does, anytime you hear C-3PO's voice, it's almost always
He's very involved.
It's almost always actually Anthony Daniels doing it, right? Mark Hamill doesn't come back to do Luke Skywalker
in video
games and all that stuff.
Incidentally, though, he does voice act, so it's kind of weird. But
I always found that very strange. But anyway, so go read that C-3PO behind the scenes, learn about Anthony Daniels and his classical mime training. May the Force be with you.